Who's in the NFL here? You? You? How about you, Tim? You, Tim.
CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Hi, this is Josh Reed, Sports Director at WIVB Channel 4 in Buffalo, and you are listening to the Tim Graham and Friends podcast.
What are you doing?
Tim's been bothering me to do this thing for his podcast. Sorry. I got to stop this, I guess.
Interesting week in Buffalo sports. We had the Sabres eliminated from the postseason and locker cleanout, highlighted by Lindy Ruff getting a contract extension. The Bills held their first open voluntary practice. So we heard from Keon Coleman for the first time since Terry Pagula's infamous comments at the end of the 2025 campaign. We have Josh Allen football cards selling for $1.35 million. The same week he turns 30, maybe some symbolism regarding your quarterback who hasn't won a Super Bowl getting to 30 and that milestone. And who has been able to finally win their first Super Bowl after that age. The list is pretty short, but we have a lot to get to here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. And I guess to mention, Jonah, you're wearing the Mickey Mantle rookie card shirt from Homage. I went with the Cleveland NBA All-Star Game shirt. Jonah, you're a little wrinkled there. I think that would maybe make you a PSA 2 graded card, maybe a 1.
I also don't know how to pose to properly show off this $1 million shirt.
You have some THOs going there. But fitting that Homage has a relationship, a licensing agreement with Topps, because the Josh Allen card that sold today at auction for $1.35 million was a Topps Chrome card. And we are not going to tell you that if you click on the link below that takes you to our partnership page with Homage, and you can explore and bop around and take a look at Josh Allen t-shirts and Bills stuff and Topps and their whole line of products that includes baseball, basketball, and football famous cards on their shirts, the iconic cards of Topps history on a t-shirt. You will be helping out Tim Graham and Friends. We cannot guarantee that anything there will be worth $1.35 million, let alone $1 million, but check out Homage. It supports us and cool stuff. Jonah, your thoughts, I mean, we won't dwell on it, but your thoughts on a Josh Allen football card selling for $1.35 million, the most expensive football card to have been sold in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when I saw the reporting that this family pulled the card and how potentially life-changing that could be for them. And it's a 1 of 1, correct? You know, there aren't really anyone's like this that just happened to be in this pack that, a grandmother had bought for her grandchildren or something like that.
Yeah, 3 grandsons, ages 15, 12, and 10. And she spent about $1,000 on this box of cards, 20 packs in the box, 4 cards in each pack. But you're guaranteed 1 autograph, but you're not guaranteed any type of autograph. It could be Dion Dawkins. It could be, Tua Tagovailoa. You don't know who it's going to be. And they got the Josh Allen and the one of one, meaning there's no one other like it. And it features a patch from his jersey, one of his game-worn jerseys. And last year he wore one that was in gold trim because he was the reigning MVP. You're talking about, for those who are listening and can't see my gestures, try to picture an NFL jersey, and it has that NFL logo at the V-neck of every collar in the NFL on all the jerseys. Josh Allen's and the offensive player of the year and offensive rookie of the year, the defensive player of the year, defensive rookie of the year, all five of those players wore the special patch. So Josh Allen, then you remove that patch, you embed it in the card. The card is autographed by Josh Allen, has a picture of him, and it's the only one you can get in the entire run of all the cards. And this grandmother found it.
Yeah, so my grandmother's bought me a lot of cards and a lot of sticker books. I used to like those with the NFL players in the past, and none of it was ever worth even $1.35, I don't think, much less 1.35 million. It's different. It's a lot different than what I remember from collecting cards in the 80s and 90s, in which a lot of those cards are now, what you see reprinted on these homage T-shirts. But back then, it was a lot about buying the packs and completing your set and getting the whole team or the whole set from the year, and maybe you made trades with your friends or you use your extra ones between the spokes of your bicycle, and it was more of kind of a childhood hobby. And there were some thoughts. I mean, I remember being a kid in the 80s and 90s and thinking, that Mickey Mantle card from 1950 something is worth millions today. What rookie card, what Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card in my collection is going to make me a millionaire down the line? It didn't turn out that way. So I think it's cool for the kids and the grandmother and the family involved that's able to cash in on this. I am always curious when these things happen, any memorabilia. I think I saw some Michael Jordan sneaker, might have been a card that sold for $7 million or something not that long ago. And I wonder who's paying for this and how do they recoup their investment? Is this Josh Allen card going to be worth 2.7 million in a couple of years? Or I find it hard to, extract the cash value from some of these things that have this on paper monetary value, because who's really shelling out the real coin to get these trinkets?
Yeah, a lot of you see Logan Paul and Jake Paul, they're making some of these purchases. I'm not saying that they did for the Josh Allen card, but sometimes you'll see it's just people with have an obscene amount of money and don't know what to do with it. And influencers who will publicize a major purchase of memorabilia, whether it's sports or Pokemon or whatever, music memorabilia, and they will publicize it on their channel, build up some interest, and then flip it for a profit. And then who knows what it's worth as time goes on. Comic books are another big one, art, anime, all kinds of things that people just have money to waste, apparently, even in this economy. But I sometimes feel when I watch some of these shows occasionally regarding sports auction houses or memorabilia things, people who are into collectibles, even works of art, famous works of art, is they're competing against themselves probably when it comes time to get into these auctions. The auction house had on with my WGR show with Brad Ryder today. We had Larry Holder from The Athletic, who's been covering this story. He handles our memorabilia vertical over at The Athletic, and he guesstimated that it's probably 20% that the auction house takes off of that 1.35 million. Now, maybe they do it at a discount for the publicity aspect of it. It was Fanatics who has the tie-in with Topps, and the Fanatics auction house did it. Maybe they want to flip it and publicize this card because it was in the news, and they want people to go out and buy more Topps Chrome football cards, which just came out a few weeks ago. So anyway, it's a little bit of an incestuous racket, but yeah, it's just wild. It was amazing to me to see. Wanted to bring it up because I know you're not all that into it. I always like to talk to people who aren't into it because it is absurd. There is no inherent value to any of these things. It's not gold bar. It's not diamonds. Although I guess on a philosophical sense, you can say why does gold have a value? Why did somebody just decide gold and silver were going to be of worth? But It's a piece of cardboard and cloth and blue ink. And Josh Allen, it was in his possession for a few seconds, apparently. But yeah, it's fascinating, the phenomenon of it. Let's stay with Josh Allen. We don't have to talk about cards, but he did turn 30 this week. There's some symbolism there. 30, just a nice round number. It's a milestone. There have been quarterbacks who've won their first Super Bowl after that age. Peyton Manning, Drew Brees. I'm missing a couple. And then John Elway was the oldest at 37, although he had been to a few Super Bowls before he won his first, thanks to Terrell Davis. I'm sorry, Terrell Davis. I always have to stop me. That's Terrell Owens, Terrell Davis. Um, I'm missing somebody who did it a little bit. Peyton Manning was 30. Drew Brees, I think, was 31. Oh, Steve Young at 33, and Matthew Stafford at 34. So you're dealing with guys, most of them on their second team or way down the line with a second or third head coach. And then Elway was just strange circumstances. He had help from Shannon Sharp and Terrell Davis, right? And you wouldn't say that was him driving those Broncos teams under Mike Shanahan. But anyway, your thoughts, Jonah, on just Josh Allen at 30. You can't call him a 20. He's now a 30 something. And is the clock ticking any louder than it was a year ago?
Yeah, incrementally. I do think the passage of time, as Josh Allen or any football player and any person for that matter gets older year by year by year, eventually Josh Allen will be too old to play football and he'll retire. But I don't think the clock got louder today at age 30 than it was 2 days ago at age 29
right.
and almost 30. And I don't think that 30 is some kind of magical number where you're on the wrong side of 30 and you start to decline, especially at that position. Age is like Alex Lyon, it's an amorphous blob these days. People are getting older and older and having a health span that lasts longer. And whether you say, 40 is a new 30 or 30 is a new 20 or something like that, yesterday's age is not today's age in the same way. So some of the same comparisons to quarterbacks that didn't win after age 30, I think, is changing. And there's been a lot of players and quarterbacks who maybe didn't win the Super Bowl at an advanced age, but had MVP seasons like Matthew Stafford did and got their team to the conference championship game or got their team to the Super Bowl. I mean, there are examples, I think, of Peyton Manning seemed to get old right away within one season. He was really good the year before and even good at the beginning of the year, then had an arm injury and never really came back from that. So
the neck injury also, and necks, of course, when you're a pocket passer. I mean, well, any type of passer, but yeah, that was a bad injury to have. If you're going to draft injuries and say, what are the ones you don't want? You might take a knee before a neck. Or I'm sorry, if an injury you prefer to have, you might take a knee reconstruction to a recurring neck problem.
Yeah. So back to Josh Allen, I wouldn't be concerned about his physical abilities or his quarterback ability regressing in his early 30s. Maybe that comes in his later 30s, but that's still several years away. I do wonder, as he gets older and more experienced, and if he looks at a milestone birthday and some of the milestones he's had in his life over the past year or two, and he changes it all or evolves or matures in his mental approach to the game, and I'm sure he will, and how that plays out and how that manifests. And now with a new head coach who's younger and closer in age to Josh Allen, more in his generation than Sean McDermott was, with a lot of younger players. His teammates now are almost a generation, or at least an NFL football player generation behind him. I know he's still doing the handshakes with the wide receivers, but will there be a date, as he gets a bit older? Speaking of age of quarterbacks, I was watching Aaron Rodgers' press conference this week, and he struck me as looking very old, which, he is, my age, but his visual appearance, his beard, his gray hair, seems to have really advanced in the past couple of years. And,
but when I was
Aaron
growing
Rodgers
up, guys, 35-year-olds look like Aaron Rodgers do now. It's just fun. It's how the how people age differently, just like you say, generation to generation. Wilford Brimley was, in his 40s when he was in Cocoon, and he looked like he was, it was a retirement community. So, that's different situation. But yeah, I think that if you were to take Aaron Rodgers today, put him back in the 70s or 80s and have people guess how old he was, they'd say, oh, he's 55.
Yeah. Well, right. Well, look at LeBron James. He's not quite the player he was in his prime, but he's a lot closer at age 41 to what he was at age 31 than like even Michael Jordan, who was tremendous in that final year at age 40. It still seemed like a 40-year-old old man version of Michael Jordan, and we're not quite seeing that out of LeBron James and different athletes, Tom Brady being one of them. Aaron Rodgers, up until a couple seasons ago, was one of those players in his late 30s, still seemed to move around and throw the ball like he was in his late 20s. So as far as the age with Josh Allen, I think we're several years away from that affecting him as a football player. But the older he gets and the more he's experienced in his role, I think we might see an evolved person in Josh Allen.
The point I will make with that is a lot of these quarterbacks that you mentioned were pocket passers their whole lives. And Josh Allen's going to have to make a significant adjustment at some point, probably, from being a running quarterback to a pocket passer. And how does he make those adjustments, whether it be incrementally over the next few years? I mean, it's going to be difficult to retrain his brain to not say, I can hit that hole. I see an opening right there, and that's a hole that I can exploit, versus getting up into the hole or 1 yard through it and getting destroyed because you didn't have that half a step, or you didn't have that ability to bounce off the tackle. Maybe you go down just a little bit easier, even just a little bit, or you're a little bit slower, or that knee or whatever, or that elbow or whatever it is. At some point, and the Bills have admitted this, they're going to have a life with Josh Allen as a pocket passer. It's not now, and they don't think it's right around the corner, but Drew Brees, all those quarterbacks I mentioned who won Steve Young was a running quarterback, but he was preserved a bit because he spent a significant period of his career as a backup. He got destroyed while he was quarterbacking with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but then he's behind Joe Montana for a little bit. But Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, these are all pure pocket passers. And Josh Allen, how is he going to morph into, how is he going to remain as dangerous of a quarterback in 5 years as he, without the ability to run the way he does? And so that is just, we don't know. We don't know what that player is going to look like. And maybe he can put time in a bottle and disperse it, evenly for eternity. But it looks as though, the expectation would be at some point we're going to need to see a different Josh Allen.
Well, and also one thing that happens as you get older, and age 30 is, I think, when some of this starts to kick in a little bit, is your recuperative powers slow down, ability to recover from injury and get back to peak physical condition after a hard game on Sunday. Josh Allen has
flexibility.
Been tremendous. Josh Allen has just been tremendous at, well, obviously not missing games due to injury and having the longest active start streak in the league, but also he does get dinged up. He has had Sunday nights after taking a hit to his wrist or his elbow or his foot this past year, and it being a major question as to whether he was going to play the next week or even miss multiple games. And sometimes all he misses is one practice, and sometimes he's even out there good to go at the next practice. And I don't know if it's going to kick in overnight and really be something you notice here at age 30, but as he progresses into his 30s, there's going to be less and less in that. It's going to be harder and harder for him to maintain this starting streak. And it might be wise at some point in his 30s, if Josh Allen and the Bills stop trying to rely on him for every snap of every game, of every important game at least, and a bit of load management. They've already maybe started doing that in practice with him over the years, but you might see even more of that. But with a new coach and new receivers and a new program, I don't know if it's necessarily something for the Bills to focus on too much right in the here and now.
One of the players whose voices I can hear in my head when talking about age is Jason Taylor, who I covered down in Miami when I went down there to the Palm Beach Post. He was finishing his prime. He still had a few years left, a few very productive years left, but he was no longer in his prime. He was coming when I got there in 2007, and he was coming off of his defensive player of the year season. He was all pro 3 times, but he was defensive MVP in 2006. And he had another really good year in 07. That's the year they went 1-15. He was 33. Bill Parcells and he had some friction. He goes to Washington and then returned to Miami in 2009. He was 35 years old. And I remember talking to him about, and that reason I mentioned flexibility earlier is he really emphasized that as being the difference of getting older. He talked about when he was his first 5-6 years in the league, he would jog out onto the practice field, and the South Florida heat was enough for him to get loose. Yeah, he'd do a lap and do some stretches and whatever, and he was fine. But the thing that was most different when you talk to him about what's different now in you, the football player, versus when you were younger, and he would say, it takes me an hour to get ready for practice. And he's got to you get smarter about it. Yes, there's that. You're not as naive, but he would say, I have to go through a routine of stretching and making sure I eat at this hour because your metabolism's different, the way you hydrate, and it becomes way more time consuming just to be competitive or just to be effective on the practice field, let alone for a game. And he was able to have a pretty long career. And for a pass rusher to be able to go into 37 years old is obviously very impressive. But so anyways, I just think that is one of those deals too, is you just can't. Josh Allen is known, and one of the things that makes Josh Allen so cool is that gunslinger. I'm invincible. I don't need to worry about getting hurt. I can do whatever the F I want. I can take this hit. I can take this extra hit. I can lower my shoulder. I can truck this defensive back or hurdle this linebacker. I'll go into the blue medical tent against my wishes. I'm going to pop right back out of there, grab a clipboard, and be ready for the next series. I'm going to be ready for the next game. He's even proudly saying while wearing a boot at Joe Brady's introductory news conference, if there was a game this week, I would play, even though he had just had surgery on his broken bone. That's not going to last forever. And those are the things, obviously, that could be a cataclysmic adjustment that the Bills are forced to make, as opposed to you don't necessarily get to see it gradually happen and prepare for it. As with Peyton Manning or a lot of guys, sometimes you get the one injury and the world changes.
Yeah, and just maybe a quick aside on aging quarterbacks. This isn't an entirely related discussion, but something that I've been thinking about as you were talking, and then I experienced this week. I covered the Ilio DiPaolo wrestling scholarship banquet in its 30th anniversary, and there's a lot of Buffalo Bills connections with that, with Bud Carpenter and Jim Kelly being involved in starting that program 30 years ago. And it kicked off with a wrestling event at the Odd that Jim Kelly took part in and swung a helmet at the Nasty Boys tag team. But speaking of which, if anybody from Homage is listening, Nasty Boys would be a good shirt that I don't think they have available there.
Let me double check while you're talking.
And maybe I'm wrong about that. But, and Jim Kelly was in attendance with a number of alumni Buffalo Bills players, including Booker Edgerson and Ed Rutkowski, in their 80s, looking very good for their age. And Jim Kelly looking good for his age, but definitely looking, every bit his age. I think he's around 66. But the reason that struck me is because there's a lot of photographs and old newspaper clippings on the wall at Ilio DiPaolo's of Jim Kelly throughout his career. Jim Kelly when he got married 30 years ago and things like that, and how young of an individual he looks in these pictures from 1996 at about age 36. But I just remember him being a very old quarterback and a very end of the line player in 1996 and into that last playoff game when he, got injured and never played again. And, 36 doesn't seem that old anymore. I don't know if that's, related to our discussion before about how old quarterbacks can play into their late 30s and how athletes can preserve their bodies these days. If Jim Kelly was some, bit of an abnormality, or if it's just a sign of the times that, 36 in 2026 isn't the same age as it was in 1996.
I Googled, or not Googled, but searched on Homage's website, Nasty. I get to Nasty and it gives me three choices. The 1990 Cincinnati Reds, you're talking about the Nasty Boys bullpen. So there's that. There is Don't Fake the Funk on a Nasty Dunk t-shirt. And I told you that they had a licensing agreement with Topps. This is how deep they get into the Topps library. Garbage Pail Kids, remember those? Nasty Nick, there's a Nasty Nick, but no Nasty Boys tag team shirt. But yeah, all right. Hey, we'll see if we have any pull.
No Janet Jackson dancing on a chair.
No Nasty Boys from Janet Jackson. Although there is
How
a lot of pop culture, there is a lot of music.
how
No,
many Janet
no
Jackson t-shirts do you own?
six.
That's more than me. That's more than me.
Um, so let's see. I just did the music tab on here. There's Outcast, A Tribe Called Quest. These are hoodies, sweatshirts, t-shirts. Well, that's the other thing. It's not just t-shirts. They have a bunch of stuff. Starter jackets. Um,
Yeah, unfortunately, the Bills starter jacket is sold out. I'm looking at it on the page right now.
yeah, it was on sale.
Yeah.
They have Grateful Dead merch on here. Um, if you're into that type of thing. What do we have here? Oh, they have a lot of crossover. I see like Grateful Dead NFL stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Some of those designs are really good.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, back to the discussion. Um, let's Bill. So I was at Bill's voluntary practice this week. We'll wrap up the Bills, and then I'd like to get your thoughts on the Sabres postmortem, Jonah, because you were out there at Locker Cleanout both days and covered the Lindy Ruff Jarmo Kekalainen news conference after his Lindy Ruff got his contract extension. Um, Three things that were most interesting to me. Keon Coleman spoke. He didn't really, he said what you would expect him to say. He was self-reflective, but he was also self-reflective this time last year. You asked him about how he played in 2024, and he said he played like shit. You asked him about his season in 2025, he said it was ass. Sometimes, a lot of times, especially you go back to last year and you're like, wow, Keon Coleman, he's owning it. He said he played like shit. That's usually a good sign that you're going to take all the right measures and you're going to make sure you don't play like shit again. But here he was last season, benched for an entire game by Sean McDermott for showing up late again. And then he was a healthy scratch three more times down the home stretch. So he's saying he plays like ass. I asked him if he has spoken to Terry Pagula or if he has any desire to. He said, no, and why would I? I'm here. I wasn't traded. He's trying to be where his feet are, I guess. And what else can you say? That's what, if PR or his agent or anybody over the last 3 months or 4 months would speak to Keon Coleman about the things you do say once you have an opportunity, these were the things I'm sure they advised him to do. But just, he's kind of like a very chill, laid back, laissez-faire attitude, which I don't know how encouraging that is. It just seems like the same Keon Coleman to me, and that Keon Coleman vibe has not been great. And even when he does play, his production is not commensurate with being the guy they hoped would someday replace Stephon Diggs. Maybe not in terms of superstardom, but he is the big receiver acquisition they made in 2024, drafting him 33rd overall. The same offseason they moved on from Stephon Diggs. So his stat line is pedestrian if you were to average it out over a full NFL season. Not a game changer at all. And if a guy has a chip on his shoulder, he's certainly not showing it.
Yeah, I read the coverage and saw the clips of Keon Coleman
He
speaking.
says it's make it
I
or break
wasn't
it for
there.
him. Again, an
Yeah,
encouraging thing to hear him say, but it's like, okay, you've said these things before where you seem to be conscientious, but then don't follow up on it.
right. But I think he's right about that because I think the major difference with Keon Coleman right now uh, isn't necessarily him. It's the other players around him, the other receivers on the Bills roster that trade for DJ Moore to uh, presumably be the number one receiver. Having Joshua Palmer and Khalil Shakir pretty much locked in as other starting receivers. Drafting Skylar Bell. I mean, Keon Coleman was a guy who was penciled in as the hopeful number one receiver last year and even a little bit the year before, if he could come along as a rookie. And anytime he burst onto the scene, there was some hope that he was claiming that position. And now he's really battling with Skylar Bell for the fourth receiver spot, or maybe battling with some other veterans for snaps and time on the field. And he actually has to be good and productive, both in practice and in meetings and on the field, in order to just be part of the game plan, to be active, to be the Bills' fourth receiver. And if somehow that unlocks more consistency and ability in his game, then there is maybe an opportunity for him to claim the number two receiver spot and eventually be the number one receiver for the Bills. But they're not counting on him to do that. And that might change his motivation in some ways and change the way he's expressing his motivations verbally. But it might, change the way he approaches it. And, and he was also a younger, in development wide receiver when the Bills drafted him. And this could be part of, they expected maybe too much of him too soon, similar to how the Sabres had done with a lot of their prospects, bringing him along too quickly. And maybe now you get what the version of Keon Coleman in years 3 and 4 that you were hoping to get in years 1 and 2.
Another receiving target who had a disappointing 2025, tight end Dalton Kincaid. He spoke. I also wrote about this. He explained his decision not to have surgery for a second straight offseason on that troublesome left knee. Chose not to do it last year, had a really difficult campaign in which the knee hobbled him, hamstring issues that were related further hampered him, missed a lot of time. And even when he was dressed, he wasn't always on the field. He only played 38% of his available offensive snaps, a career low. And they need way more out of Dalton Kincaid for that, but he looks a lot stronger. There are a lot of Bills players who look visibly different. I don't know if that's redundant or not, but that you can tell he's thicker. And Dalton Kincaid said he was an emphasis on lower body stability, strengthening the area around the knee, worrying about balance in terms of making sure that both legs are equal. And so that way you're not cheating on one or overcompensating and all the different things that can lead to additional related injuries to that PCL. And so we asked him about the decision not to do it again. He said the doctors advised him against it. But here's a guy, and we've talked about it on the podcast, especially after Brandon Beane and Joe Brady both discussed it when I was at the NFL owners meetings down in Arizona, that that load management is in the cards for Dalton Kincaid. And here is your young tight end who you just exercised his 5th-year option, and they're taking a little bit of a gamble with him because of his lack of availability, and hopeful that their strength and conditioning people and doctors and medical, whatever they use, from biometrics to technology to common sense, on keeping this guy not only available every week, but effective. Because it's one thing to give him a jersey, as we saw last year. He would get a uniform, but then he wouldn't be on the field in certain situations, or to the point where when he was on the field, you knew the Bills were going to throw the ball because they weren't able to use him superfluously. They weren't able to just put him out there on downs to block in the run game. They wanted to maximize his potency to the point where, all right, get out there. We need you to catch this pass. And that really helps the defense. When Dalton Kincaid's on the field, they know what's coming, or I have a better idea about it. So having him out there more than 38% of the snaps would be critical. Don't know if you have any Dalton Kincaid thoughts before I hit my last bullet point, but last one was, I just thought it was interesting. Terrell Bernard, the defensive captain, doing interviews with his helmet on, reminiscent of Ricky Williams back in the 90s. Ricky Williams with his helmet on and the visor. Terrell Bernard also with the visor because of anxiety. This is Ricky Williams. I'm not saying that that's Terrell Bernard's issue, but Terrell Bernard last year became media averse. He's a captain of the team. I know that there were difficult questions with his injuries and his also production. He wasn't as effective last year as he was the season before that, but dealing with injuries, looking pretty slow, looking, worn down, and being a smaller type player in Sean McDermott's defense. That happens. It happened to Matt Milano. It happens to a lot of dudes. But he became pretty media averse last year. And to speak after that OTA on Tuesday, he kept his helmet on and the visor. And I don't know. For a captain, that's a strange thing for me. I don't know if you had any other observations coming off of the coverage of.
I can just say this about Terrell Bernard, that media version kind of started the year before, midway through the year before. He was the defensive captain, starting middle linebacker that spoke at the podium every Wednesday for about half of the season, this back in 2024, and then stopped doing it. What wasn't interested in doing that week to week would still be available to talk outside the locker room, but preferred the smaller scrums to the podium situation, and that carried into speaking less and less and being less out front as the voice of the defense last season. And as he got injured and less prominent role on the field, that played into, talking and appearing less and less. I'd be interested in what Terrell Bernard said about, his body and his weight and his fit in the defense as a linebacker, because it might be different than it was, under the previous scheme. And then as far as Dalton Kincaid, a lot of that sounds like last year. He didn't gain as much weight or in strength. I think last offseason he had more rest involved in his recovery. I would trust the doctors in their assessment of whether surgery was necessary and how to rehabilitate that specific knee injury. But Dalton Kincaid being able to stay healthy and avoid injuries, whether it's a re-injury or a new injury, is a key aspect for him fulfilling his potential as a football player. The added weight and added strength might improve that. It could work against him potentially. The added weight and strength might make him a better tight end, might make him a better blocker, or change a little bit of how the Bills can use him in different ways. It could also take a little bit away from what makes him really good, the separation and being a big slot receiver, as he was described when the Bills drafted him.
Yeah, the elusiveness, the ability to kind of slither through routes and get open in the short to medium or intermediary ranges.
Yeah, so we'll see how that plays out, on Sundays and in the football season, or on all the different days that the Bills play football games. But I think right now it's encouraging that they're on the field and recovered, with a lot of the Bills players, recovered enough from last season's injuries and the rehab to be participating in the practices and the OTAs and feeling good, feeling better, feeling stronger, quicker, whatever they want to be, is encouraging at this time of the season.
All right, Jonah, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Sabres. We're going to talk about Lindy Ruff's contract extension, all the different things that we learned from the players about injuries, Alex Tuck's contract situation, Jarmo Kekalainen's thoughts about when we come back in just a second.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.
There's a good chance he got drunk during the commercial break. It's Tim Graham and Friends.
Welcome back to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. Jonah, your thoughts on the Sabres? You were there covering it. I was watching from afar. I was not in the building, but I watched all the games and followed the coverage from the news conferences. But when it's different than when you're there and absorbing all of it in one big lump and sorting through the storylines. What were your takeaways?
Well, so I appeared on WIBB Plus programming this afternoon, and that's a different audience and a different style of sports commentary than what we're doing here at TGAF. And, they present my name in all capital letters with exclamation points to introduce the segment. And my takeaway going into that was that it was a bit of a somber tone throughout the week in the Saberhood coming out of, since the last time we were on this podcast, they won Game 6, but also lost Game 7, all the hype leading into that game and the locker clean out and things like that. But my takeaway for the WIVB Plus show today was not to be sad that it ended, but to be happy that it happened. It was such a memorable and exciting and reviving, restorative playoff run and hockey season here in Buffalo that we should really be celebrating what this team did, what this organization did, and riding the ship midseason and bringing this exciting month of playoff hockey back to Buffalo. And it didn't extend into the Eastern Conference Finals, but this is a young team that one of the youngest in the NHL, second youngest in the playoffs, with a lot of pieces locked up, and now the coach coming back that should expect to contend in the same way for a few more years to come. So what I'm wondering myself is, should I be more cynical in this analysis on this podcast with this audience? But I don't think I should. I think, there's been a lot of cynicism around the Sabres over the past 15 years, a lot of it deserved. And I think there's going to be time for that. The expectations are different now. If they're not leading the Atlantic Division and they're not contending for the Atlantic Division title and they're not pushing for a top 2 spot in the Eastern Conference and they're not making it to the Eastern Conference Finals or going further in the playoffs, it's going to be a lot like the Bills of hitting that proverbial playoff wall and having a lot of angst. That's still going to happen. That's going to come. They might have more bad luck with injuries or things like that in the future seasons. So I think now is a lot of decompressing and appreciating what this team did, what this team is, how hard they played, how popular and likable a lot of the players and their playing styles are, and that most of the characters will be back with, a few notable exceptions we could talk about. But this seems to be the beginning of a multi-year run, a lot like that 05-06 team that you covered for the Buffalo News, and how that fed into 06-07, which is a season in which they won more games in the regular season, won the President's Trophy, but that wasn't the same vibe, the same feeling, or the same excitement, especially at the end of that season, as there was at the end of the season before.
Yeah, heading into that 07 playoff season, it was, I remember talking to Daniel Briere about it. He was disappointed in how they were playing. He didn't think that they were ratcheting it up. He didn't think they were getting ready for playoff hockey like they had the season before. And he was worried about it. And turned out he was a prophet a bit, because they ended up getting destroyed in the Eastern Conference Final by the Ottawa Senators, despite having a healthy team, unlike the year before when they go into Carolina and almost won. In fact, they were leading at the end of the second period, heading into Game 7. Last week on this podcast, we talked about the possibility. We didn't say it was probable or likely, but the possibility that Lindy Ruff may be coaching his last game. Now he signs the contract extension, but he said that he did have to have discussions with his wife, Gay, about it. And it was my favorite part of the news conference. Probably my favorite part of the coverage all week was Lindy Ruff talking about his assistant coach, that meaning his wife, and that them coming to an agreement that he has the sickness, meaning he can't walk away. Your thoughts on Lindy Ruff and this? The questions were asked, and Lindy doesn't do one-on-ones or any of that type of stuff, as far as I know. So the news conference stood for, whatever he said is what we all know. But did you get any sense as to how close it was that he may have, at some point said, you know what, this is a time to walk away?
Now, I don't think it was close at all. I think his statement that he had to clear with his assistant coach at home was about the most that Lindy Ruff has ever said or hinted or indicated at his age and his, shortening shelf life as an NHL hockey coach. It's one of the first times I think he sort of mentioned that. When he got hired 2 years ago, I think there was more talk about how young he felt and how enthusiastic he was about this opportunity. And we talked about it a week ago, and I thought it was a good conversation to have because it was a little odd that, Lindy Ruff did not yet have a contract extension, and there wasn't much of even like media leaks or rumors about whether there would or wouldn't be something announced at the end of the season. And I think a lot of us expected
I
going
think
into
it
that
was
news conference.
I think that there was, according to the people I spoke with, that it was Lindy's job if he wanted it. There was no chance that the Sabres were going to move on from Lindy Ruff, that they wanted him back. They had offered, and it was just a matter of, is he going to do it? And let's wait until the playoffs are over to make the announcement.
Yeah. Well, and those of us that cover the team day to day, or people that are even there more often than I am, or on the road with the team, nobody was expecting a Lindy Ruff retirement. Nobody felt like Lindy Ruff was reaching the end of his time coaching this team unless that decision was made for him, and didn't really expect that decision to be made for him with the success that they had. There was some sentiment that, maybe he'll get bumped up into a advisor role in the front office, but Lindy Ruff has said at various points in his career that he's not really interested in that he has the sickness, if you will, for coaching, and that's the job he wants, and that, he wouldn't willingly move upstairs, and the Sabres didn't really have the coach in waiting kind of right there to slide into that role now. We'll see if over the next 2 seasons that type of successor develops on the Sabres bench. But, and as John Weill reported in his Associated Press report on the contract extension, that the parameters of this extension had been reached weeks ago, and it was kind of understood that Lindy Ruff would be coming back and what the contract would look like, but it was decided maybe from both ends. But I think Lindy Ruff had a lot to do with this, to not finalize it, to not announce it, to not take any attention away from the team in the playoff run, and that it was, I guess maybe a handshake deal until the season was over, and then it became a more formalized sign deal. Jarmo Kekalainen called it a no-brainer, said it didn't take them very long to go through the paperwork and get this deal done after the season. Like a lot of us, I think, expected that at that media availability that Lindy Ruff would announce, or that Jarmo Kekalainen would announce that they've reached a contract extension, that he would be coming back. But when the release came out at 2:00, I believe, before Lindy Ruff was scheduled to speak, initially at 4:20, and then that got moved up to 4, there weren't leaks coming in ahead of that, and there wasn't really much chatter that this is going to be announced an hour or two ahead of time. That was surprising, might not be the word, but that was not an expected press release at 2 p.m. by anybody that was covering the team down there with me, or I think anybody that you might have been in the radio studio with. So it was an interesting thing, something we all thought would happen that still was somewhat surprising in the moment.
Right. They do keep things pretty battened down, and they always have, really, with the Sabres. It's been unlike the NFL. Darcy Regeers was the same way. I don't know why one sport's able to do it and the other one not, but I think in the NFL they want leaks. The NFL actually has people who like to leak, and the leaks are generally, well, it's not just the NFL. I think it's most sports teams. And we learned about it with the St. Louis Blues, right? The whole Rob Thomas trade situation. Oh my God, how could it get out? Well, the Blues, well, certainly, or his agent or whatever. I mean, it's not like somebody was, tapping the phone lines or hacking into the computer system.
And the Sabres had more leaks with their most recent general manager before Jarmo Kekalainen took over. Information would leak out more often, more frequently, I think, under Kevin Adams. What did you think about his comments in the Athletic?
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I guess when I was setting the table at the beginning of the podcast, I forgot that part. I mean, that was interesting for Kevin Adams. He, from what I understand, just wanted to wait until the season was all over. He didn't want to be a distraction. He didn't want to seem like he was taking credit, or like, hey, guys, don't forget about me. He didn't want to be boorish about it or seen to be like parasitic on the Sabres excitement or the all the good things that were going. So he wanted to let it run its course. He said all the things that a PR consultant would advise him to. And I'm not saying that he had one at this stage of his career, probably doesn't necessarily need one. All those years as an NHL player And then as an NHL executive, he's had plenty of advice over the years from communications executives, and anybody from crisis control to the happiest of horseshit types of marketing people have all get. I'm sure he knew not to step in on a rake, and so he gave the interview to Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic and just said all the nice things, explained the palm trees and taxes comment, took a little bit of an apology there, or made one, I should say, and didn't overly take credit for building the roster, but talked about how proud he was. It was inferred, you could read between the lines of that's why he was proud. I mean, he did a lot of work that helped this team get to where it was, while also being effusive in his praise. And then also that, combined with both Kekalainen and Lindy, going out of their way to say nice things about Kevin Adams and what he did for them. It kind of flew in the face of the Pete Gwelly comments that appeared later in the regular season about how they needed to move on from Kevin and all these. There was a little contradiction, but of course everybody's happy at the end of the season. They're trying to put the best. Everybody move forward. Kevin Adams is trying to get another job in the NHL. The Sabres would look petty if they said anything negative about Kevin Adams, whether it was Kekalainen or Lindy, and also probably proactive that they mentioned him unsolicited, each of them, as I recall, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe stops anybody from asking the question. So they say it out front, and then maybe the question doesn't need to be asked. And the question could be asked in a pointed way or in a certain way that makes it uncomfortable. So anyway, it was just interesting. I don't think there was newsworthy in a sense of anything. There were no big revelations in Kevin Adams speaking. Just the fact that he spoke, I guess, was the newsworthy part of it.
Right. Lindy Ruff was asked about the young players, Konsta Helenus, Noah Ostlund contributing in the playoffs, how encouraging that was. And he took it on his own right to Kevin Adams and indicated that not only Kevin Adams scouted and drafted those players and brought them to Buffalo, but when Kevin Adams was here before Lindy Ruff took over as the coach. And when he brought in Lindy Ruff, he was selling Lindy Ruff on these young players, on these pieces, that they're going to be good players, they're going to be contributors, have confidence in them, stick with them, bring them along. And that's how the Sabres would eventually break their playoff drought and become the contending team that they were this season. And the implication was that, over time, Lindy Ruff came to agree with that, but didn't know as much about the potential of some of these young players when he took over. And there's a belief that at that point in time, and really throughout Lindy Ruff's career, that he maybe trusted veteran players more than younger players. And as this playoffs evolved, the Sabres got a bit younger and younger. Noah Ostlund and Konsta Helenus in more high-minute roles. It was only 2 games before they got him into the lineup, but you kind of contrast Konsta Helenus here in 2026 with Thomas Vanek in 2006 and how much more Lindy Ruff trusted a player who was drafted a little bit lower and wasn't even considered as high of a prospect as Thomas Vanek was. But Lindy Ruff's coaching had evolved, and I think over time he grew to trust Kevin Adams and the players he scouted, at least and drafted and brought in. I do think there was an overarching theme that was not really talked about much, but in not being talked about, I think that's where this Substack kind of comes along. And that all throughout the season, when the Sabres were rising from last place to first place to back in the playoffs to in contention, the hottest team in hockey for however many months they were, there was a lot of talk about Kevin Adams getting fired and how that aligned with the turnaround in the season and how that was the change that the Sabres needed. And there was different members of the media, different members of the fan base that believed that the Sabres never would have gotten to this level without changing their general manager, that change at the top ignited the way that they played. And I never really bought into that, or I think different things happened at the same timeline that weaved their way in together, but one thing didn't cause the other. There was a lot of talk in the locker cleanout days about, a dinner that the Sabres leadership group had that Captain Rasmus Dahlin called with assistant captains Tage Thompson, Matthias Samuelsson, and Alex Tuck, on the road when they had lost 3 in a row and were about to embark on their 10-game road streak, 10-game winning streak that would change the season. And at that point in time, I mean, I don't need to tell you this, but at that point in time, Sabres are on that 3-game losing streak. You and Matthew Fairburn begin to report out that a general manager change is forthcoming. It would be 3 more wins by the Sabres on the road before that change happened and the Sabres came home. So the Sabres did fire their general manager while they were on a 3-game road trip, but it did seem like that decision was made before the Sabres started that winning streak, when they were still on that 3-game losing streak, when they had this team dinner on the road. And there was also a meeting with these 4 players, the leadership group, and Lindy Ruff. And I think you've had Andrew Peters on WGR Radio talking about some of the things that might have been said in that meeting or some of the things players might have expressed to Lindy Ruff. And it does seem like that road trip, which Kevin Adams was, I don't think he was with them. I think he was away from the team at the start of that road trip. But that road trip with those players and that coaching staff is when the Sabres turn things around. And there's a belief held by many that Kevin Adams being fired changed the way this team thinks, it changed the way they played, it changed the way they feel about themselves. But it seemed like things changed and the ball got in motion independent of that, before that. And the real story of the season, I mean, Kevin Adams getting fired is a big part of the story of the season, but the real reason on the ice, Sabres went from worst to first and became this contending team are different and more multi-layered than who was in the general manager's chair. And that's not to say that a change wasn't necessary and that Jarmo Kekalainen is not the better general manager now going into this offseason or even at the trade deadline and going forward with this team and this club. But I'm not so sure that the change from Kevin Adams picking players and putting the roster together to Jarmo Kekalainen picking players and putting the roster together, which he really hasn't done a ton of yet. He's kind of just getting started with that now, is why the Sabres were a different team on the ice in December, January, and February than they were prior to that.
What are your thoughts on, Jarmo Kekalainen had some interesting things to say. Well, both guys, Alex Tuch and Kekalainen. Tuch did not sound optimistic. Kekalainen says they want him back. I don't know, reading between the lines, I know that I don't know, it just doesn't seem right in terms of, or maybe Tuch is just that kind of guy where he is going to be so indifference or neutral, I guess. He's just going to try to, but it didn't sound too, it just didn't sound very warm. His words or his optimisms about coming back, other than him talking about his son and how much fun they're having being, Trippy Tuck and number 89 and, announcing him as the Buffalo, the family aspect of how much fun this season was and how rewarding it was after so many bad seasons to finally get there. But then again, the dynamic of his age versus his performance against the Canadians and all that type of stuff, and the salary cap situation. Anyways, it just seemed kind of cynical, his behavior, and also your camera is having problems because of the face on the Mickey Mantle on your
t-shirt.
Oh,
is that what it's doing?
Yeah, it's trying to it's including your friend.
I see. Well, is that helpful? If I do that? Cross my arms. Well, right. There was a lot of subtext and reading between the lines with the Alex Tuch situation, contract situation, pretty much all season long. The Sabres have been very consistent in saying they want to bring Alex Tuch back, that they value him as part of the team, they want him on the team. Alex Tuch and his teammates have been very consistent in saying, that Alex Tuch wants to be a Buffalo Sabre, that the Buffalo Sabres want Alex Tuch to continue to be a Buffalo Sabre. Everybody wants to keep playing hockey with Alex Tuch in blue and gold, red and black, whatever colors the Sabres choose to wear that night. But if they really were on the same page about how much the Sabres want Alex Tuch and how much Alex Tuch wants to be a Sabre, they would have already come to an agreement. They've been having discussions for over a year. Clearly, they're not on the same page in terms of salary and numbers in the deal, whether that's salary or length of the deal or a combination of both. Alex Tuck said he's going to have a difficult decision to make, or some difficult decisions to make. That seems to imply that he knows how much money the Sabres are willing to offer or willing to pay, and understands that he probably will be offered more money by another team in free agency, and will have to choose between the Sabres' less lucrative offer and making more money. He said he's going to do what's best for his family. So that probably means taking another contract elsewhere. Maybe if the numbers are close enough and his son and his wife like living in Buffalo and he likes living in Buffalo, that the Sabres do get some kind of small hometown discount, or if it's not that big of a salary difference, Alex Tuck will choose the lifestyle and the happiness that he has with this team and the ability to win with this team.
Jonah?
I believe Vancouver, British Columbia.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, and he has some ties out there. He played early part of his career in Las Vegas, and Minnesota was where he was drafted, I believe. So yeah, he hasn't been in New York State. He did grow up in New York State, but he hasn't been in the Northeast in New York State his entire life, and he understands and probably has some affinity for living in other places out west. But I think it's really going to come down to the dollars and cents, and the Sabres probably have already indicated they're not willing to pay top of the market money. They're not willing to pay what Alex Tuck might be worth on the open market. And Alex Tuck is probably not going to be on the Buffalo Sabres next year unless he decides that staying with this team and in this city and winning a Stanley Cup in Buffalo is more important to him than maximizing his earnings. And I think when he said he's going to do what's best for his family, that's code for maximizing your earnings, right?
Yeah, that's code. That's the code. Okay, Jonah, we need to wrap it up.
I like how people always do that, athletes and coaches. It's always the blame's always on the family. It's always my
right.
my greedy wife that is making me take this multi-million-dollar contract. If it was just me, I'd play for free. But these greedy kids need to eat.
Well, here's the thing. I need to end the podcast because I need to blame my family. My son is caught out of state with some car problems, and we're having some trouble getting roadside assistance to help him because he's not me, even though he is on my policy and that is my car.
That's why you're picking up new jobs and new radio.
Yeah, that's
shows.
why if you're watching on YouTube, I've been shuffling through some papers here trying to find the right number to call. So I need to get off here. Well, we need to end the podcast, and I'll worry about the rest later.
You know what I think you should do? Just go buy him some football cards, and maybe he'll get $1 million golden ticket in that.
He's in Tennessee at the moment, so the idea of him being stuck in the middle of the Great Smoky Mountains or wherever the hell he is for an extra couple of days, or the Ozarks or wherever the hell. I know the Ozarks in Tennessee. Anyways, I got to go. Thanks to everybody out there for listening. Please go buy some t-shirts, sweatshirts, sweatpants, jackets at Homage, because I need the money for these car repairs and support. And Jonah needs the money to get out of his parents' attic where he's been broadcasting from. Thanks to everybody.
I need to buy more books.
Start selling those books. Thanks for listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants.